The crosshairs didn't waver, not even a millimeter, not even when the sweat traced a burning line down Lieutenant Natalie Reeves' cheek and pulled against the rubber eyepiece of her spotter scope. Not even when the first vehicle, the Convoy, crested the ridgeline 3 kilometers to the east, its outline shimmering in the heat distortion like a mirage that had no business being real. 87 civilians, 12 vehicles, 3 relief trucks carrying medical supplies, water, and enough antibiotics to save an entire refugee camp. And not a single one of them knew they were driving into a kill corridor. Reeves exhaled through parched lips. For hours, she had been lying motionless on this ridge for 4 hours, buried beneath a ghillie suit threaded with thermal dispersing materials. Her body pressed so flat against the scorched earth that she had become indistinguishable from the rocks and dead brush surrounding her. The sun had baked the moisture from her skin. The stone beneath her had branded bruises into her ribs. And the hostile radio she had liberated from a dead insurgent 2 weeks ago had been feeding her a steady stream of nightmares. 14 hostiles, 2 RPG teams, 1 heavy machine gun nest, mortar crews positioned 900 meters north of Convoy's planned route, all of them waiting, all of them patient, all of them invisible to the Convoy commander who was, at this very moment, leading 87 innocent people into the mouth of a trap that had been designed specifically to swallow them whole. The radio crackled again. Arabic, calm, professional, Convoy approaching. 2 minutes to kill zone. Confirm all positions. A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Each one was another nail in a coffin that didn't exist yet. Reeves's finger found the safety on her suppressed precision rifle. She didn't flick it off. Not yet. Instead, she forced her breathing to slow, forced her pulse to drop from 72 beats per minute to 64, forced every fiber of her being to submit to the cold mathematics of what was about to happen. She was not supposed to be here. Her mission was reconnaissance only. Observe, report, stay hidden. The intelligence analysts back at FOB Artemis wanted eyes on hostile movement patterns in this valley, not intervention. They wanted data, not bodies. They wanted her to watch, document, and transmit, then disappear like the ghost her call sign demanded she be. Specter. That was what they called her. The soldiers who whispered her name in mess halls. The officers who pretended she didn't exist in briefings. The intelligence files that tracked or confirmed eliminations across 3 different theaters of operation. Specter. The shadow that moved through war zones without a sound. The scope that found targets no one else could see. The trigger finger that never trembled. If that opening hooked you, stay with me. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to that ridge where Lieutenant Reeves was about to make a choice that would change everything. The first vehicle was a white transport van. Its sides were painted with red crescents, international symbols of humanitarian aid that were supposed to guarantee safe passage. Supposed to. In a valley where 3 days of continuous fighting had reduced farmhouses to skeletal husks and turned the earth black with ash, those symbols meant nothing. They were targets. Behind the van came the rest of the convoy. Battered pickup trucks with tarps stretched over their beds, 2 buses that looked like they had survived a previous war, and an ambulance that rode low on its suspension, weighed down by equipment that would become worthless if no one was left alive to use it. Captain Rachel Torres was driving the lead vehicle. Reeves knew this because she had studied the convoy manifest before it had been transmitted. Torres was Special Forces Coordination, a logistics officer who had requested this escort assignment specifically because she wanted to make a difference. She was 34 years old, had a husband stationed in Germany, and had written in her personal file that she believed in the mission. Reeves wondered if Torres would still believe in the mission 30 seconds from now, when the first RPG turned her convoy into a funeral pyre. The radio crackled again. Visual confirmed. 12 vehicles. Estimate 80 to 90 passengers. No military escort visible. Drone coverage? Jammed. They are blind. Reeves's jaw tightened. The drone. That was supposed to be the convoy's guardian angel. A UAV circling overhead with thermal imaging and a direct link to close air support. But someone on the other side had planned for that. Someone had deployed electronic countermeasures that had turned a $4 million piece of surveillance equipment into a paperweight. And now 87 civilians were driving into an ambush without a single eye in the sky to warn them. She shifted her weight by fractions of an inch, redistributing pressure from her bruised ribs to her elbows. The movement was so small that an observer standing 3 feet away would not have detected it. But for Reeves, it was enough to bring her scope into perfect alignment with the western edge of the valley, and the 3 figures crouched behind a collapsed wall, their RPG launchers already loaded and shouldered. The first RPG team was 1,243 meters away. Reeves knew this because she had already ranged every potential firing position in this valley during the 4 hours she had spent waiting. She knew the distances. She knew the angles. She knew the wind speed, 14 kilometers per hour, crossing left to right, and the temperature, 34 degrees Celsius, and humidity, low enough to make her throat feel like sandpaper. She knew that at this range, with these conditions, her bullet would drop 47 inches by the time it reached the target. She knew that the subsonic round would take 2.4 seconds to cross the distance, which meant she would have to lead her target by almost nothing if he stayed still, or by several feet if he moved. She knew all of these things because knowing them was the only thing that had kept her alive for the past 8 years. And she knew that if she pulled the trigger, she would be violating direct mission parameters. The radio traffic continued. Calm, professional, the voice of a man who had done this before. Machine gun team, confirm your position. Confirmed. 640 meters from Convoy route. Clear line of sight to the second bus. Reeves' stomach turned to ice. The second bus. She had seen the manifest. The second bus was carrying families, mothers, fathers, children. A 7-year-old girl named Emma whose photograph had been included in the humanitarian briefing because her father had requested specifically that his daughter be evacuated from the combat zone. Emma had blonde hair and a gap-toothed smile and was holding a stuffed rabbit in the picture. That bus was 640 meters from a heavy machine gun that could turn it into a smoking ruin in under 8 seconds. Reeves' finger found a safety again. This time, she flicked it off. Command would be furious. She had broken protocol, compromised her position, engaged without authorization. She would accept whatever consequences came after she got 87 people out of this valley alive. The convoy was 1 minute from the kill zone now. The lead vehicle had entered the narrowest part of the valley, where the road curved around a burned-out farmhouse and dropped into a depression that would trap them like fish in a barrel. Torres was driving carefully, probably scanning the ridgelines for threats she couldn't see. She was doing everything right. It wasn't going to be enough. Reeves settled her cheek against the stock of her rifle. The weapon was an extension of her body now. 5.6 kilograms of precision machined steel and carbon fiber that had been tuned to her specification by armorers who understood that at extreme ranges, tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch meant the difference between a clean kill and a miss. Her range card lay beside her, handwritten notations marking distance, wind, elevation. She didn't need to look at it. She had memorized every number during the hours of waiting. Target 1, RPG gunner, West Valley Wall. Range 1243 meters. Wind correction 8.3 inches left. Elevation minus 4.2 degrees. Target 2, RPG loader, same position. Range 1241 meters. Adjustments minimal. Target 3, second RPG team, North Ridge. Range 1290 meters. Wind correction, 9.1 inches left. She would have to work fast. The suppressor on her rifle would reduce the muzzle signature to a dull thump barely audible beyond 200 meters. But the hostiles would know something was wrong when their teammates started dropping. She would have seconds, maybe less, before they reacted. Her breathing slowed to almost nothing. Her pulse dropped to 60. Her vision narrowed until the only thing that existed in the universe was the crosshair and the man behind it. The RPG gunner was young, maybe 22. He had a scraggly beard and nervous eyes, and he kept adjusting his grip on the launcher like he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. He was probably new. He was probably someone's son. Reeves did not think about any of this. Thinking was a luxury that snipers could not afford. Instead, she processed data: range, wind, temperature, target movement, breathing cycle. The convoy entered the kill zone. The young man raised his RPG to his shoulder. Reeves exhaled half a breath, held, and squeezed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with a force that she absorbed through practice muscle memory. The sound was a whisper, a muted thump that dispersed into the rocks and wind before it could carry more than 100 meters. But the bullet had no such limitations. It crossed the valley at 970 meters per second, invisible, silent, inevitable. 2.4 seconds later, the young RPG gunner jerked backward as if struck by an invisible fist. His launcher tumbled from his hands. His body folded sideways and disappeared behind the collapsed wall where he had been hiding. His partner turned, confused. He hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anything. One moment his friend had been beside him, and the next, Reeves' second shot caught him in the chest before he could complete the thought. 2 down, 12 to go. She worked the bolt with mechanical precision, chambering a fresh round without lifting her eye from the scope. The brass casing from her second shot rolled away from her position, and she noted its location with part of her mind. She would collect every casing before she left. There would be no evidence. There would be no trace. There would be only the dead. The convoy had stopped. Torres must have seen something. Maybe the RPG gunner falling, maybe a flash of movement, because the lead vehicle had braked hard and the rest of the convoy was accordion folding behind it. Bad. That was bad. Movement was survival. A stationary convoy was a target. The radio crackled with sudden urgency. Positions 1 and 2 are down. Repeat, positions 1 and 2 are not responding. What do you mean, not responding? I mean they are dead. Something is killing our men. Reeves was already shifting her aim to the second RPG team on the North Ridge. 1290 meters. Wind correction 9.1 inches. Elevation minus 3.8 degrees. She fired. The round traveled for 2.7 seconds before it found the first gunner's skull. The second man beside him barely had time to register the wet impact of his friend's death before Reeves's fourth shot ended his confusion permanently. 4 down. 10 to go. The radio exploded with panic chatter. Someone was shouting orders. Someone else was praying. A third voice was demanding to know where the shots were coming from. They couldn't see her. The ghillie suit made her invisible. The suppressed rifle gave no muzzle flash. She was a ghost on a ridgeline, and ghosts did not miss. The convoy was still stationary. Torres had dismounted from the lead vehicle and was crouched beside the engine block, scanning the ridgelines with binoculars. She was looking in the wrong direction, east toward the valley entrance, completely unaware that the woman keeping her alive was positioned to the west. Move, Reeves thought. Get your people moving. As if Torres had heard her, the captain suddenly turned and sprinted back to the driver's door. Seconds later, the lead vehicle lurched forward, and the rest of the convoy began to follow. Better, but they weren't out yet. The machine gun nest. That was the next threat. 640 meters from the convoy route, positioned behind a wall of sandbags on the eastern slope. 3 men, 1 PKM heavy machine gun. Enough firepower to shred every vehicle in that convoy before they reached the southern exit. Reeves shifted her position, adjusting her angle by millimeters. The movement sent a fresh wave of pain through her bruised ribs, but she ignored it. Pain was data. Data could be processed and dismissed. The PKM crew was preparing to fire. 1 man was feeding the ammunition belt, while the other 2 steadied the weapon on its bipod. Their target was clearly visible through the scope. The second bus, now accelerating down the valley road. The bus carrying Emma. Reeves's crosshairs settled on the gunner's head. 640 meters. Child's play compared to her earlier shots. Wind correction 3.2 inches. Elevation minus 1.9 degrees. She fired. The gunner's head snapped back, and he collapsed across the weapon. The loader stared at his dead companion for a full second before his instincts kicked in, and he scrambled to take his place behind the machine gun. Reeves fired again. The loader crumpled beside the first body. The third man, likely a spotter or ammunition carrier, broke from cover and ran. He made it 8 steps before Reeves's 7th round caught him between the shoulder blades and sent him sprawling into the dirt. 7 down. 7 to go. The convoy was moving faster now. Torres had clearly understood that this valley was a death trap, and she was pushing her vehicles to their limits. The engine screamed. Dust billowed behind them in choking clouds. They were halfway through the kill zone. Reeves allowed herself a single breath of relief. Then the mortar rounds started falling. The first explosion erupted 40 meters ahead of the lead vehicle, throwing a geyser of dirt and rock into the air. The second landed 20 meters behind the ambulance, close enough to pepper its rear doors with shrapnel. The third struck the road itself, leaving a crater that forced Torres to swerve wildly to avoid it. Mortar crews, 900 meters north. Reeves had known about them from the radio intercepts, but she had prioritized the direct fire threats first. Now they were bracketing the convoy, walking their rounds closer with each shot. She needed to find the spotter. Mortar crews didn't aim by sight. They relied on forward observers to call in corrections. Somewhere in this valley, someone was watching the convoy and radioing adjustments to the mortar teams. Reeves swept her scope across the northern ridge. Rock formations, dead brush, a collapsed water tower that had been abandoned years before the fighting started. There, a glint of glass, binoculars, a man in civilian clothing crouched behind a boulder. Radio pressed his ear. He was 1,480 meters away, and he was calmly directing fire onto a convoy of women and children. Reeves adjusted her aim. The wind had shifted, now blowing at 16 kilometers per hour instead of 14. She recalculated on instinct, adding half an inch to her correction. She fired. The spotter's radio fell from his hand as the round punched through his temple. His body slumped sideways and rolled out of sight behind the boulder. 8 down, but the mortars were still firing. They must have had a second spotter. Another explosion. This one close enough to lift the rear wheels of the supply truck and slam them back down with a crack that Reeves could hear from her position. The driver lost control, and the truck sideswiped the vehicle in front of it before recovering. The convoy was falling apart. Reeves' scope swept faster now. North ridge, northwest, northeast. Where was the second spotter? There, 1,520 meters. Another man with binoculars, this one better concealed behind a natural rock formation that had shielded him from her initial sweep. She fired. The round took him in the chest. He fell. 9 down. The mortars stopped, but the convoy's problems were far from over. The radio crackled with a new voice, different from the others, calmer, more professional. The voice of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. All surviving units, converge on the ambush site. There is a sniper on the western ridge. Find her and kill her. Find her and kill her. Reeves felt a cold smile touch her lips. They knew she existed now. They knew her approximate position. They were coming for her. Good. That meant they were focused on her instead of the convoy. She shifted her position slightly, moving deeper into the cover of a rock formation that would shield her from approach on 3 sides. Her body screamed in protest. For hours of immobility had turned her muscles to concrete, but she forced it to obey. The convoy was still moving. 3 more minutes and they would clear the southern exit. 3 more minutes and 87 civilians would be safe. She just had to hold the ridge for 3 more minutes. The first hostile appeared on her scope 400 meters to her left, a man in tactical gear, moving low and fast through the rocks. He was flanking her position. Behind him, 2 more figures advanced in parallel. Counter snipers. They were hunting her. Reeves's heartbeat remained steady. Her breathing remained slow. Her crosshair tracked the lead man as he paused behind a boulder to scan the ridgeline with his own scope. For a fraction of a second, their crosshairs met. She saw his eye through his scope, and he saw hers. She fired first. The man's body jerked and fell. His 2 companions dove for cover, shouting to each other in a language Reeves did not speak, but understood perfectly. They were calling her position. They were coordinating. They were good. But Reeves was better. She had been in this situation before. The memory came unbidden. A rooftop in a different country. A different war. 43 targets over 72 hours. 0 friendly casualties. A legend that she never discussed and refused to confirm. This was simpler than that. Only 14 primary targets, plus whatever reinforcements had arrived. And she had already eliminated 9. The 2 surviving counter-snipers had gone to ground behind a rock formation approximately 390 meters to her northwest. They were pinned, unwilling to expose themselves to her fire, but they were also blocking her line of retreat if she needed to reposition. And reposition she would need to do, because somewhere out there, the man with the calm voice was still alive, and he had given orders. The convoy had cleared 2/3 of the kill zone. Torres was pushing her vehicles hard, and the dust cloud behind them had grown thick enough to obscure the rear vehicles. The ambulance was struggling. Its rear tires looked low, and it was falling behind the rest of formation. Reeves noted this with concern but could not address it. Her immediate problem was the two men trying to flank her. She waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. More kills were made by waiting than by shooting. The enemy would grow impatient. The enemy would make mistakes. She just had to outlast them. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The convoy continued its desperate flight. The ambulance fell further behind. Then one of the counter-snipers moved. He was good, staying low, using natural cover, advancing in short bursts that minimizes exposure. But he made one mistake. He underestimated her range. He thought he was beyond accurate rifle fire. He was wrong. Reeves led her shot by 18 inches, accounting for his movement speed and the crosswind. The round took him in the hip as he sprinted between two boulders, spinning him around and dropping him in the open. He was still alive. He tried to crawl toward cover, dragging his useless leg behind him. Reeves could have finished him, but she didn't waste a round. He was no longer a threat. The second counter-sniper broke cover and ran not toward her, but away. He had seen what happened to his partner, and he had decided that no amount of money or ideology was worth dying on this ridge. Reeves let him go. He would spread the word. He would tell others what he had seen today. The story would grow. The legend would build. Specter, 10 hostiles down. The convoy was almost clear. Then the ambulance's rear tire exploded. The vehicle slewed sideways, its driver fighting the wheel as rubber shredded across the road. It ground to a halt in the middle of the valley, completely exposed, completely vulnerable. Inside that ambulance were medical supplies worth more than most people made in a year. But more importantly, there were 2 medics and a driver, 3 more lives that Reeves had sworn to protect. The remaining hostiles saw their opportunity. The radio crackled with the calm voice again. All units, converge on the disabled vehicle. Kill the occupants and take the supplies. Reeves' scope swept the valley. She counted 4 hostiles advancing from the east, the survivors of the original ambush, now reinforced by additional fighters who had emerged from hidden positions. They were moving fast, covering ground with the confidence of men who believed the sniper's attention was elsewhere. 4 hostiles, 8 rounds remaining. She had enough. The first target was 890 meters away, moving at a fast walk. She led him by 6 inches and fired. He dropped. The second target saw his companion fall and dove for cover. But there was no cover, just open ground and burned grass. Reeves' shot caught him as he hit the dirt. The third target fired blindly in her direction, a burst of automatic rifle fire that struck rocks 20 meters below her position. He was panicking. Panic made people predictable. She fired. He stopped panicking. 13 down. The fourth target had reached the ambulance. He was standing beside the driver's door, weapon raised, preparing to execute whoever was inside. Reeves' shot covered 935 meters in 1.9 seconds. It struck the man in the center of his back and exited through his chest. He collapsed against the ambulance door and slid to the ground, leaving a smear of red across the white paint. 14 down. But there were more. The reinforcements. The calm voice on the radio. The convoy's remaining vehicles had stopped near the valley exit. Torres had dismounted and was running back toward the disabled ambulance, her sidearm drawn. She was going to try to save her people. She was going to get herself killed. Reeves could not protect Torres. The captain was moving too fast, too unpredictably, and the remaining hostiles were closing from multiple angles. If Reeves fired on one, the others would use the distraction to advance. It was simple mathematics, and the mathematics were not in Torres's favor. The radio crackled. The sniper has revealed her position. Mortar Team 2, saturate the western ridge. 40-meter search pattern. Mortar Team 2. They had held a second team in reserve. Reeves cursed silently. She had assumed the mortar threat was eliminated when she killed both spotters. She had been wrong. The first round landed 30 meters to her left, close enough to shower her with dirt and rock fragments, but not close enough to cause damage. The second round landed 20 meters to her right. They were bracketing her, searching. She had to move. But moving meant abandoning her firing position. It meant giving the hostiles a window to reach the ambulance. It meant letting Torres die. Reeves made her choice in a fraction of a second. She gathered her rifle, her range card, and her hydration bladder, and rolled sideways out of her concealed position. The movement was fast, controlled, and completely silent. The third mortar round landed exactly where she had been lying 2 seconds earlier. She found new cover behind a rock formation 15 meters to the south. It was inferior to her previous position, less concealment, worse firing angles, but it would have to do. She brought her scope up and swept the valley. Torres had reached the ambulance. The captain was helping the driver change the shredded tire, while the 2 medics crouched behind the vehicle, their hands raised in useless defense. 3 more hostiles were advancing from the northwest. They were 1,200 meters away and closing fast. Reeves fired. The first hostile dropped. The second dove for cover. The third kept running, either brave or stupid or both. Reeves fired again. 2 down. 1 remaining from that group. 5 rounds left. The surviving hostile had found cover behind a burned-out truck. He was shouting something, probably calling for reinforcements, but Reeves couldn't hear him over the ringing in her ears from the mortar blast. A 4th mortar round landed 40 meters to her east. They were still searching. They hadn't found her new position yet, but they were getting closer. Torres had the tire changed. The ambulance's engine roared to life, and it lurched forward, accelerating toward the rest of the convoy. But the hostile behind the truck was raising his weapon. He had a clear line of fire on the ambulance's driver. Reeves's shot caught him in the shoulder before he could pull the trigger. He spun, dropped his weapon, and collapsed. 16 down. 4 rounds left. The ambulance cleared the kill zone and joined the rest of the convoy. Torres was sprinting back toward her vehicle, her boots pounding against the cracked asphalt. Almost there. They were almost safe. Then the technical vehicle appeared. It came from the south, a pickup truck with a mounted machine gun and 4 men in the bed. It had circled around the valley while Reeves was focused on the northern threats, and now it was racing to intercept the convoy before it could reach the exit. If that technical reached the convoy, it would tear through those civilian vehicles like paper. Reeves shifted her aim. The technical was 1,387 meters away, traveling at approximately 60 kilometers per hour. It was a nearly impossible shot, a moving target at extreme range, with a crosswind that had now increased to 18 kilometers per hour. Nearly impossible, but not impossible. She led the target by 42 feet. She accounted for the wind, the range, the bullet drop. She calculated the travel time, 2.8 seconds, and the vehicle's movement across that time. Then she fired. The round struck the technical's front left tire and shredded it instantly. The vehicle's driver lost control as the rim dug into the road. The technical flipped once, twice, 3 times before coming to rest on its roof in a cloud of dust and debris. No one crawled out. 17 hostiles down. 1 round left. The convoy cleared the valley exit. 87 civilians, 0 casualties. Reeves remained motionless for another 20 minutes after the convoy disappeared. The mortar fire had stopped. Either they had run out of ammunition or they had given up trying to find her. The radio traffic had devolved into confusion and recriminations, with various voices blaming each other for the disaster. She listened to all of it, gathered intelligence, noted call signs and frequencies for later analysis. Then she began the slow, painful process of extraction. Her body had taken damage. The rock fragment from a near-miss mortar round had peppered her left shoulder and upper arm with shrapnel, tiny pieces of stone that had punched through her ghillie suit and embedded themselves in her flesh. The wounds weren't serious, but they were bleeding and they hurt. She would report them as a training accident in 3 days. Her commanding officer would not ask questions. He never did. Reeves collected her spent brass casings first, all 18 of them, scattered across the rocky soil around her 2 firing positions. Each one was physical evidence, and physical evidence was unacceptable. She placed them in a small pouch on her vest, counting twice to make sure she had them all. Then she erased the signs of her presence. She swept the ground with a brush made from dead grass, eliminating the impressions left by her body. She covered the scorch marks from the mortar rounds with fresh dirt. She removed the ghillie suit and packed it into a rucksack, transforming herself from a ridge-dwelling ghost into an ordinary woman in dusty fatigues. The transformation was complete in 7 minutes. By the time she began her descent toward the extraction point, there was nothing left to indicate that anyone had occupied this position. She was a ghost. Ghosts left no traces. The walk to the extraction point took 3 hours. She moved slowly, carefully, using every piece of covered terrain offered. The hostile forces were still out there, scattered, demoralized, but still dangerous. If they found her now, wounded and exhausted, she would not survive the encounter. But they didn't find her. They never found her. That was the point of being Specter. When she reached the extraction point, a dry riverbed 4 kilometers south of the valley, the helicopter was already waiting. It was a black UH-60 with no markings, crewed by men who wore no insignia and asked no questions. She climbed aboard, strapped herself into a seat, and closed her eyes. The helicopter lifted off. The valley disappeared behind her. 87 civilians. 0 casualties. 18 hostiles eliminated. 1 silent operator who would never be thanked by name. The mission was over, but the consequences were just beginning. 3 days later, Reeves sat in a sterile medical bay while a corpsman picked rock fragments out of her shoulder. She had reported the wounds as a training accident, a fall during a live-fire exercise, and the corpsman accepted the story without comment. He was young, new. He probably didn't know who she was. Some of these are pretty deep, he said, holding up a piece of stone with forceps. You're lucky none of them hit an artery. Luck had nothing to do with it, Reeves replied. The corpsman didn't understand what she meant. He finished his work in silence, applied bandages to the wounds, and handed her a bottle of antibiotics. Stay off that arm for a week, he said, and try not to fall off any more cliffs. Reeves took the antibiotics and left without answering. Her commanding officer found her in the mess hall that evening. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb was a 53-year-old career soldier with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. He sat down across from her without asking permission and set a manila folder on the table between them. Interesting reading, Webb said, tapping the folder. After-action report from a humanitarian convoy that passed through the Ashar Valley 3 days ago. Reeves didn't look at the folder. I'm not familiar with that operation, sir. No. The convoy commander, Captain Rachel Torres, claims that unknown overwatch prevented the total loss of her convoy and all 87 civilians aboard. She describes precision sniper fire that eliminated 14-plus hostiles at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. She recommends investigation and commendation for the unknown operator. Reeves continued eating her meal. Her face revealed nothing. The intelligence division has started a file, Webb continued. They're calling the unknown operator Specter. Apparently, there have been similar incidents over the past 18 months. Impossible shots. Silent interventions. Convoys saved. Sounds like a ghost story, sir. It does. Webb leaned back in his chair. The thing about ghost stories, Lieutenant, is that someone always knows the truth. Someone always knows who's doing the haunting. Reeves set down her fork and met his eyes. What do you want me to say, sir? That I violated direct mission parameters? That I compromised a classified reconnaissance position? That I engaged 14 hostiles without authorization and revealed elite capabilities that were supposed to remain secret? Webb's expression didn't change. Did you? If I did, I would be facing court-martial. My career would be over. My clearance would be revoked. Everything I've worked for would be destroyed. And Reeves held his gaze. And 87 civilians would be alive, including a 7-year-old girl named Emma, who was on a bus that a heavy machine gun was about to shred into confetti, including 2 medics and an ambulance driver who were about to be executed for their supplies, including Captain Rachel Torres, who believed in the mission enough to volunteer for escort duty in an active war zone. Webb was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and picked up the manila folder. The intelligence division wants to investigate. They want to identify Specter, verify the kills, and bring the operator in for debriefing. Reeves's heart rate increased by 3 beats per minute. She controlled her breathing. What did you tell them, sir? Webb stood up. He tucked the folder under his arm. I told them that Specter doesn't exist. I told them that Captain Torres was suffering from combat stress and imagined the whole thing. I told them that the hostile casualties were the result of interfactional fighting, insurgent groups turning on each other. He paused at the edge of the table. The investigation has been closed. There will be no commendation. There will be no record. As far as the United States military is concerned, nothing happened in that valley 3 days ago. Reeves felt something unknot in her chest. It might have been relief. It might have been something else. Thank you, sir. Webb shook his head. Don't thank me, Lieutenant. Thank the 87 people who will never know your name, but will live the rest of their lives because of what you did. That's your commendation. That's the only medal you'll ever receive for this operation. He walked away. Reeves sat alone in the mess hall for a long time after that. She finished her meal. She took her antibiotics. She thought about a little girl named Emma who would grow up without ever knowing that a shadow on a ridge had kept her alive. The burden of anonymity was heavy, but it was the burden she had chosen. 3 weeks later, she was back in the field. A different country, a different mission, the same silence. Her scope found a ridgeline 1,200 meters away, where a sniper was preparing to eliminate a United Nations relief worker. The sniper was good, concealed, patient, professional. But Reeves was better. She exhaled, held, and squeezed. The target dropped. The relief worker continued walking, never knowing how close he had come to death. Specter remained invisible. Specter remained silent. And somewhere in the world, another convoy was moving through hostile territory, unaware that a ghost was watching over them from a ridge they would never see. The legend continued to grow. Intelligence analysts across 3 different agencies began compiling files. They called it the Specter phenomenon, a pattern of unexplained sniper eliminations that appear to target hostile forces threatening civilian populations. The shots were too precise to be random. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone was out there, hunting the hunters, protecting the defenseless, but no one could identify who. Captain Rachel Torres submitted her after-action report and returned to logistics coordination. She never stopped thinking about that day in the valley, the day 87 people should have died and didn't. She told the story to her husband during their next video call. She told it to her colleagues during late-night conversations. She told it to anyone who would listen. There was someone up there, she always said. Someone who saw what was happening and made a choice. Someone who broke every rule in the book to save people they'd never met. Most people assumed she was exaggerating. Combat stress, they said. Survivor's guilt. The mind's tendency to create meaning from chaos. But Torres knew what she had seen. She knew what she had heard. The distant thump of suppressed rifle fire. The sudden collapse of hostiles who had been seconds from killing her convoy. She knew that somewhere on the western ridge, hidden in the rocks and dust, a guardian angel had been watching. She hoped, wherever that guardian was, they knew what they had done. She hoped they understood that their sacrifice meant something. Emma's father told his daughter a different story. There was a shadow on the ridge, he said, tucking her into bed on her first night in the refugee camp. A shadow that watched over us and kept the bad people away. What kind of shadow? Emma asked. The kind that protects little girls, her father replied. The kind that never sleeps. The kind that will always be there when you need it. Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. Like a guardian angel? Yes, like a guardian angel. Emma fell asleep thinking about shadows and angels and ridges she had never seen. She would grow up to become a physician. She would spend her career providing medical care in war zones, inspired by the convoy that had saved her life and the mysterious protector who had watched over them. She never learned Specter's name, but she carried the legend with her. Lieutenant Colonel Webb continued his career. He retired 6 years later with 3 stars on his collar and a classified file locked in his personal safe. The file contained after-action reports from 17 different operations. Operations that should have ended in disaster, but didn't. Operations that had one thing in common. A sniper on a ridge, impossible shots, silent salvation. He never told anyone what he knew. He took the secret to his grave. But sometimes, late at night, he would open a file and read through the reports one more time. He would trace the pattern of shots on operational maps. He would calculate the distances, the wind corrections, the elevation adjustments. And he would shake his head in wonder at the woman who had made it all possible. Reeves herself never read the file. She never saw the intelligence reports. She never learned that her actions had inspired an entire investigation, or that the investigation had been deliberately derailed by a commanding officer who understood what she had sacrificed. She simply continued doing what she had always done. Watching, waiting, protecting. The years passed. Conflicts ended and began. Governments rose and fell. Through it all, the Specter phenomenon continued, a pattern that defied explanation, a legend that refused to die. Soldiers whispered the stories to each other during deployments. Convoy commanders scanned ridgelines with binoculars, hoping to catch a glimpse of the shadow that might be watching over them. Intelligence analysts added new data points to files that grew thicker with each passing year. And Lieutenant Natalie Reeves grew older. She never married. She never had children. She never formed the kind of permanent connections that most people built their lives around. Her life was the scope, the trigger, the silent vigil on ridges that no one else would climb. It was a lonely existence, but it was the existence she had chosen. Somewhere around her 40th birthday, she stopped counting her confirmed eliminations. The number had grown too large to process, a wall of names and faces that would haunt anyone who tried to remember them all. Instead, she counted the lives she had saved, the convoys that made it through, the relief workers who survived, the children who grew up to become adults. The number was higher than anyone would ever know. Her last mission came on a Tuesday in spring. The flowers were blooming in a valley that had known nothing but war for 3 decades. A peace negotiation was scheduled to begin in a fortress that had changed hands a dozen times. And a sniper team was preparing to eliminate the delegates before they could reach the negotiating table. Reeves was 47 years old. Her eyes weren't as sharp as they had been. Her hands trembled slightly when she held them still for too long. The rock formations dug into her joints with an intensity that younger soldiers would not understand. But her aim was still true. She found a hostile sniper at 1,580 meters, a man in camouflage who had chosen a perfect position overlooking the approach road. He was waiting for the motorcade that would carry the delegates. He was patient, professional. He never saw her. Reeves's shot caught him before he could squeeze his trigger. His body slumped over his rifle, and the delegates continued their journey, never knowing how close they had come to annihilation. The peace talk succeeded. The war ended 6 months later. A generation of children grew up without knowing the sound of artillery fire. Reeves read about it in the newspapers during her retirement. She lived in a small cabin in the mountains, far from the cities and the conflicts and the ridges she had once called home. She kept her scope mounted on the wall. As a reminder, she kept her range cards in a drawer that she rarely opened. She never told anyone what she had done. She never accepted credit or recognition or thanks. But sometimes, on clear nights when the stars were bright and the wind was still, she would climb the ridge behind her cabin and sit in the darkness. She would scan the horizon with eyes that still remember how to find targets at impossible ranges. She would listen to the silence that had been her constant companion for so many years. And she would remember 87 civilians in a burning valley, a 7-year-old girl named Emma, a captain who believed in the mission, a commanding officer who protected her secret. The weight of her service would never be recorded in any history book. The sacrifices she had made would never be acknowledged by any medal or ceremony. The legend of Specter would remain exactly that, a legend, a ghost story, a whisper passed between soldiers who knew that some heroes never revealed themselves. But somewhere in the world, a woman who had once been that 7-year-old girl was saving lives of her own. A peace treaty was holding because a negotiation had succeeded. Convoys were moving through valleys that had once been kill zones. The ripples of her choices extended outward, touching lives she would never know, shaping futures she would never see. That was enough. Lieutenant Natalie Reeves, call sign Specter, looked up at the stars and allowed herself a single moment of peace. Then she climbed down from the ridge and returned to the silence that had always been her home.